Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking a long journey into a state that really holds an outsized influence on American identity, on its politics.
Oh, oh.
Yet, it's often just summarized by a few simple stereotypes.
Oh, absolutely. Dairy, beer.
And if you're lucky, a big foam cheese hat.
Exactly. So today we are diving deep into Wisconsin, the state known everywhere as America's Dairyland.
You're right.
But for you tuning in, our mission is to peel back those, familiar layers and uncover the really profound, complex narrative that actually defines the Badger State. This is an accelerated briefing, really, to give you that comprehensive understanding.
I think the most surprising thing, for me at least, is just how many contradictions Wisconsin holds. We have sources talking about an ancient history tied to Ice Age megafauna, a completely unique geological makeup with this rugged, driftless area.
And the politics.
The politics are, frankly, astounding. I mean, this is a state that was the simultaneous birthplace of the anti-slavery Republican Party and the pioneering progressive movement.
And we are going to connect those dots for you. We'll start by revealing the true, kind of gritty origin of the Badger State nickname.
Which has nothing to do with the animal, right?
Absolutely nothing to do with the animal. It's all about resource extraction. Then we'll track how an environmental crisis actually forced an economic pivot to dairy.
And finally,
We'll analyze how its status as this quintessential swing state today is really just the latest chapter in, 150 years of intense political experimentation.
okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the most fundamental question. Where did the name Wisconsin even come from? When you hear the word Wisconsin today, it sounds so settled, so English. But the journey of that name is a centuries-long story, and it originates deep in the Algonquian language family.
That's right.
So let's start at the beginning. What is the earliest record we have of the name?
Well, the name originates entirely from the Algonquian name for the Wisconsin River, which is the state's dominant inland waterway.
The river itself.
Yes. And the first European to record it was the French Jesuit explorer, Jacques Marquette, back in 1673. He noted the name in his journals, basically trying to phonetically capture the indigenous sound.
And how did he spell it?
He wrote it down as Miscousing.
Mescousing, and that's the origin point for this whole linguistic evolution that followed, mostly driven by the French.
Precisely. The French were the main European presence in the Great Lakes region through the 17th and early 18th centuries. So subsequent French writers took Marquette's recording and they gradually altered the spelling to better suit their own phonetic conventions.
So they changed it.
They shifted Miscousing to Wisconsin. And if you look at the written French, that spelling gets you pretty close to the sound we know today.
And then when the Americans arrive, they take that French spelling and anglicize it one more time, and that lands us with the spelling we use today.
Correct. As English speakers began to settle and gain control of the territory in the early 1800s, they adopted the existing name, but dropped that French "we" beginning.
And settled on Wisconsin.
Yes, settling on Wisconsin. It was a gradual evolution, but the spelling we use was officially adopted by the legislature of the Wisconsin Territory in 1845, just 3 years before statehood.
It's remarkable, really. The name passes through 3 different languages, but stays rooted in that first Algonquian description of the river.
It's a phenomenal piece of linguistic endurance.
But since the name is so old, do we know what the original Algonquian word mescousing actually meant? Is there a definite translation?
Unfortunately, no. The exact original meaning has become a little obscured over time, which is, pretty common with ancient place names.
Right.
However, the strongest and most widely accepted theories tie the name directly to the most prominent geographic features of the river.
The red sandstone.
The striking red sandstone formations along its banks, yes.
That makes a ton of sense, especially with the famous Wisconsin Dells.
Exactly. One leading theory suggests the name came from the Miami word mescousing. The proposed translation is something like, "It lies red," or maybe "gathering of the waters," but that red component is key.
So a literal description of the landscape.
It's widely believed this was a direct reference to the reddish sedimentary rock cliffs and gorges you find in the Dells area, which look particularly vibrant from the water.
So if you're a traveler on that river in 1673, that red rock landscape would have been the most visually defining characteristic for hundreds of miles.
It would have been the defining landmark, which justifies it as the name. However, as with any lost language history, we do have to acknowledge some alternative suggestions.
Like the Menominee suggestion.
Yes, we noted an interesting counterpoint from the Menominee Nation, the suggestion that it might simply mean good place.
A good place.
A Menominee elder, Navitus attorney, proposed that the origin was the Menominee word Wakushai, which translates simply to that.
It's a beautiful interpretation.
It is. While the red sandstone theory is more rooted in visual geography, Good Place is a lovely, if less specific, reflection of the river's significance as a pathway and a source of sustenance. Both really underscore the importance of the waterway.
And that reference to the earliest inhabitants brings us to the just profound depth of Wisconsin's human history. This story doesn't start with French canoes in the 1600s.
Not at all. We are talking about human habitation going back 14,000 years.
Wow.
The first chapter begins around 10,000 BCE with the Paleo-Indians. They arrived during the final stages of that massive ice age known as the Wisconsin glaciation.
So they were adapting to the cold, hunting the megafauna of the era.
These were the ultimate survivors, and we have specific archaeological proof of them interacting with those now extinct animals.
The Boaz mastodon.
Yes. The most compelling evidence from this period is the Boaz mastodon, which was unearthed in southwest Wisconsin. This mastodon skeleton was discovered right alongside unmistakable evidence of human activity.
Projectile points.
Specifically projectile points.
Yeah.
Confirming that these earliest Paleo-Indians were contemporary with and successfully hunted these enormous creatures. It just immediately sets the timeline of Wisconsin's history in this global climate context.
Then, as the ice receded around 8000 BCE, the environment warmed up and the cultures evolved into what's called the Archaic period.
Right, and they shifted away from mastodon hunting. The Archaic period saw groups transition to a more localized subsistence, relying on, sophisticated techniques for hunting, fishing, and gathering.
But the next big cultural explosion happened during the Woodland period.
That's right, which spanned from roughly 1000 BCE to 1000 CE. This era marks the gradual adoption of agriculture and the rise of unique, settled communities.
And this is where we find the incredible legacy of the effigy mound culture.
Right.
I want to pause on this because this is a globally significant archaeological phenomenon.
It absolutely is. Wisconsin was the undisputed center, the heartland of the effigy mound culture. These groups were famous for constructing thousands of geometric and, most famously, animal-shaped earth mounds all across the landscape.
But these weren't just random piles of dirt.
No, not at all. They were elaborate, massive structures, often representing birds, bears, deer, or panthers.
What was their purpose, and what kind of effort did it take to build them?
Well, the exact social structure that drove their construction is still debated, but they're generally seen as burial sites, ceremonial spaces, territorial markers, or possibly even astronomical indicators.
Wow.
The sheer effort required to move all that earth and shape these precise effigies, it just speaks to a highly organized society with significant coordination. It's an environmental archive of human presence that lasted for centuries.
Later on, we start to see the rise of more structured settlements, showing influence from cultures further south.
Correct. As we move closer to European contact between 1000 and 1500 CE, we find these substantial fortified settlements.
Like Astalin.
The most notable example is the village at Astalin in southeastern Wisconsin. This site shows strong influence from the Mississippian cultures centered in the south, characterized by large, truncated earthen pyramids and palisaded walls.
So by the 17th century, when the French explorers first show up, who were the indigenous nations that controlled this diverse, well-established landscape?
At the time of contact, the landscape was shared by several major groups. The Ho-Chunk, or Winnebago, who have lived in the region for centuries. The Menominee, known for their traditional rice harvesting. The Ojibwe, particularly up in the northern regions.
And there were others who had migrated in, too.
Yes, other groups, including the Sauk, Meskwaki, or Fox, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi, had migrated into Wisconsin from areas further east, often displaced by conflicts like the Beaver Wars. So it was a diverse, politically intricate tapestry of nations long before the French ever arrived.
So the French chapter opens in the 17th century, and their sole economic focus was the commodity that drove all European expansion across the upper Midwest: fur.
The fur trade was the single organizing principle of early European interaction. The earliest recorded European visit is widely attributed to Jean Nicolet in 1634.
He landed near Green Bay, right?
Traditionally believed to have landed near Green Bay at Red Banks. He was actually looking for a passage to China, but what he found was a ready supply of beaver pelts.
And then later explorers, like Radisson and Groseilliers, they further opened up that trade network.
They did. In the 1650s and 60s, Pierre Radisson and Medard de Groseilliers made multiple visits to both Green Bay and Chequamegon Bay on Lake Superior, establishing critical trade routes and partnerships. It was a relationship based on exchange. European goods for furs.
The really critical moment for geographic understanding, though, was the discovery and mapping of the Fox-Wisconsin waterway.
Absolutely. The same Jacques Marquette who first recorded the name Mescousin, along with Louis Joliet, were the first to document their passage on this incredible highway in 1673.
And this waterway connected the Great Lakes all the way to the Mississippi.
All the way. It connected Lake Michigan via Green Bay to the Mississippi River near Prairie du Chien. It was the key to accessing the entire continental interior.
So despite all this activity in the trading networks, the French didn't really build permanent settlements for almost a century. Why were they so transient?
The French crown's priority was commerce and control, not necessarily mass colonization in this specific region. Traders like Nicolas Perrot established temporary wintering posts, but the men themselves were always mobile.
And that changed after the French and Indian War.
That changed only after the geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically when Great Britain defeated France, taking formal control of the territory in 1763. This is the moment everything pivots.
So Britain now owns the territory, but that doesn't mean the French influence just vanished overnight.
Far from it. Many French Canadians decided to stay in the territory rather than return to what was now British Canada.
And this is how we get the first permanent European settler.
This is how we identify Charles de Langlade. He had already established a trading post at Green Bay in 1745, but he moved there permanently in 1764, establishing a lasting Euro-American community.
And there's a physical piece of history from that period still standing.
We do. The Tank Cottage in Green Bay, which dates back to 1776, is recognized as the oldest standing building in Wisconsin. It's a direct architectural link to that era of French-Canadian settlement that persisted under British rule.
I find this next insight so counterintuitive. The fur trade, the whole reason the French were there, actually reached its peak under British control. How did that happen?
It really came down to policy and, well, bureaucracy. The French system had been very restrictive, limiting trade licenses to maintain control.
Okay.
The British, however, were keen on maximizing profit and, crucially, maintaining peace with the Native American nations who supplied the furs. So they adopted a much more liberal licensing policy.
More competition, more trade.
The surge in activity and competition led to the peak of the fur trade.
Yeah.
Green Bay, or La Bay as the French called it, became a truly prosperous, if isolated, community.
This region then became a U.S. possession after the Revolution in 1783, but again, effective control was slow to come.
It took the U.S. decades to assert full control, partly because of lingering British influence and partly just due to the vast distances.
Right.
But once the U.S. finally solidified its presence, the region rapidly moved through various territorial classifications until 1836, when the Wisconsin Territory was created. This American ascendancy marked a fundamental shift away from the fur trade and toward the next great economic driver, lead mining.
And that transition from trading furs to digging minerals is where we get to the foundation of Wisconsin's identity, specifically its most famous nickname. So let's explain the true, slightly rugged origin of the Badger State moniker.
The nickname comes directly from the lead mining boom that started in the 1820s and early 1830s in the southwestern corner of the territory.
Centered around places like Mineral Point and Dodgeville.
Exactly. This was spurred by the American government seeking mineral resources and the promise of easy wealth through a massive, rapid influx of immigrants, Americans from Illinois, Kentucky, and Missouri, and large numbers of Europeans.
And these weren't people looking to build long-term homes. They were there for quick wealth.
That's the critical insight. These miners arrived quickly and were focused intensely on extraction. They often lacked the time, the resources, or frankly, the money to construct proper above-ground housing, especially before the brutal upper Midwest winter set in.
So what did they do?
They improvised. They housed themselves by digging into the hillsides, the very holes they were mining, and they used these shallow excavations as temporary shelter.
They were burrowing into the earth.
They were, quite literally, burrowing into the earth to survive the winter. This practice earned them the immediate and slightly derogatory nickname Badgers.
They were living like the animals themselves.
Yes, and the name stuck. It came to symbolize the resourcefulness and toughness of these early hardscrabble settlers. It became the state's unofficial identity long before the actual badger was adopted as the state animal in 1957.
So the University of Wisconsin mascot is really a nod to these miners?
It is. The university adopted the badger as its mascot back in 1889, recognizing this cultural origin. The nickname is a powerful reminder that Wisconsin's identity is founded on hard labor and resource extraction, not just charming wildlife.
But this sudden massive influx of settlers driven by lead mining had immediate and catastrophic consequences for the Native American nations we talked about earlier.
It created intense, violent tension. The relentless push onto native lands, driven by the desire for mineral rights, culminated in two major armed conflicts. First, the Winnebago War in 1827.
And then the Black Hawk War.
And subsequently, the Black Hawk War of 1832, which is one of the most significant and consequential conflicts in Midwestern history.
And it was devastating.
It was. The war resulted in the complete and tragic forced removal of most Native American tribes, including the Sauk and Meskwaki, from the vast majority of the territory. This period of conflict irrevocably shifted the demographic and political control of Wisconsin, paving the way for statehood.
Let's shift away from history for a moment to the foundation upon which all of this rests, the geography. Wisconsin is so often simplified in the public imagination as just flat, endless farmland. But the reality is a vast, incredibly diverse, and water-rich landscape.
It's uniquely situated in the upper Midwest. It's perfectly positioned between the continent's largest freshwater bodies, the Great Lakes, and the continent's largest river system, the Mississippi.
With extensive coastlines on both Lake Superior and Lake Michigan.
Yes, exactly. And when you talk about water-rich, the statistics are just staggering.
How much water are we talking about?
Wisconsin has over 15,000 named lakes. That totals about 1 million acres of inland water surface. The largest is Lake Winnebago, a massive, shallow lake.
And the rivers.
That doesn't even account for the rivers. Over 12,000 named rivers and streams, stretching for an astonishing 84,000 miles.
Wow, that volume of water must mean its Great Lakes coastline is immense.
It is truly immense. Wisconsin has the third longest Great Lakes coastline, exceeded only by Ontario and Michigan. It stretches over 800 miles.
Which is absolutely central to its economy and history.
Central to its ecology, economy, shipping, and, as we'll see, its industrial history, especially the paper industry.
Geologically, the state is structured around 5 distinct regions. Can you give us a quick overview before we focus on the most unique one?
Sure. Up north, you have the Lake Superior lowland. Moving south, the Northern Highland covers the bulk of the northern interior. It's rocky, forested, and contains the state's highest point, Timms Hill.
Right.
Below that is the Central Plain, which is flatter but known for its unique sandstone outcrops. Most of the population lives in the eastern ridges and lowlands in the southeast.
And finally, the western upland, which contains that geological anomaly, the driftless area.
The western upland is the key to understanding the state's most distinct topography. It is the core of the famed driftless area, which is perhaps the most significant geological marker in the entire Midwest.
And that term driftless, why is it so important to its identity?
That name is crucial. It means this entire region was strategically bypassed by the massive continental ice sheets during the last major glaciation, the Wisconsin glaciation.
So the glaciers just went around it.
They did. Glaciers act like immense bulldozers, flattening the landscape and depositing a huge mix of rocks and sediment known as drift. Because the glaciers split and flowed around this specific area, it remained untouched.
So while the rest of the upper Midwest was flattened and scoured, the driftless area retained its ancient topography. What does that dramatic difference look like on the ground?
It looks nothing like the flat plains we associate with the Midwest. It's a landscape of deep river valleys, steep rolling hillsides, and impressive bluffs carved deeply into sedimentary rock by millennia of water erosion.
Rugged and dramatic.
Very. It offers microclimates and ecological zones not found anywhere else, which leads to unique flora and fauna.
And the famous geological formations must be remnants of this pre-glacial age.
Absolutely. Within the driftless area itself, you find features like the Baraboo Range, which are ancient quartzite hills that resisted erosion. And adjacent to it, in the Central Plain, you get the spectacular sandstone formations of the dells of the Wisconsin River.
The red sandstone from the beginning of our conversation.
That's the one. These towering cliffs and narrow gorges were carved by the massive rush of meltwater around the glaciers, leaving behind this dramatic, unique geological architecture.
It sounds like a landscape built for conservation.
It is. The environment is highly valued, which is why, despite the state's reputation for farming, forests still cover 46% of Wisconsin's total land area.
And that includes the massive Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest.
1.5 million acres. And speaking of conservation, we have to mention a very recent addition to its aquatic heritage.
The new National Marine Sanctuary?
Yes. The Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary was established in 2021 in Lake Michigan. It protects a large number of historically significant shipwrecks, recognizing the enormous commercial importance of the Great Lakes.
That focus on the landscape, the lead, the forests, the soil, it leads us directly to the economy. And Wisconsin's economic identity wasn't fixed. It went through a series of rapid transformations in the 19th century.
A very volatile period.
Hmm.
After the lead mining boom declined, Wisconsin briefly became one of the U.S.'s leading producers of wheat in the 1850s and 60s. At the same time, the northern highland was dominated by the highly profitable but equally destructive lumber industry.
So you had intense agriculture in the south and massive deforestation in the north. This had to have created an environmental disaster by the late 19th century.
That is precisely what happened. The intensive wheat farming rapidly depleted the soil fertility, and the vast lumber industry stripped the state of its old-growth forests, leading to rapid soil erosion. By the 1890s, both industries were in rapid decline.
And this environmental and economic crisis was the catalyst that forced the state to make its most famous pivot.
Okay, let's pause and analyze this crucial pivot.
Yeah.
How did farmers collectively decide to switch from grain to dairy, and what kind of institutional support did they get? The shift began in earnest in the 1890s. The depleted soil wasn't great for wheat anymore, but it was excellent for growing hay, alfalfa, and feed corn, perfect for feeding livestock.
And this was supported by immigration.
Strongly supported by the massive waves of European immigration, especially German and Scandinavian settlers, who brought with them deep traditions and expertise in cheese-making and butter production.
So the culture was already geared toward dairy, but the institutional backing was needed to standardize and optimize the industry.
Absolutely. The cultural practice was fused with academic innovation. The development of the dairy industry was pioneered by scientists like Stephen Babcock at the University of Wisconsin. In 1890, he developed the famous Babcock test.
Which let farmers measure the butterfat content in milk.
Quickly and accurately, yes. Which meant farmers could be paid based on the actual quality and richness of their product, which incentivized better production.
And that really cemented the state's destiny.
That combination of immigrant expertise, environmental necessity, and scientific backing did it. America's Dairyland was officially adopted as the state slogan in 1940. Today, Wisconsin leads the nation in cheese production, responsible for nearly a quarter of America's total output.
And they take it seriously. I read they're the only state that requires licenses for cheese and butter makers.
They are. It demonstrates the rigor and quality control they apply.
That's a fascinating detail. But beyond cheese, the sources reveal Wisconsin is secretly dominant in some extremely specific niche crops.
The diversity is surprising. Wisconsin is the nation's leading producer of cranberries, growing over half of the entire national crop.
Because of the marshy soil in the Central Plain?
Perfect for cranberry beds. And the other one is truly astonishing.
Ginseng.
Ginseng, indeed. Wisconsin produces an astonishing 97% of the nation's ginseng, primarily grown in Marathon County. And it's shipped almost entirely to East Asia, where it's highly valued. It shows a deep adaptation of Wisconsin agriculture well beyond the dairy cow.
Which is, of course, the official state domestic animal.
Of course.
While the dairy cow is the cultural symbol, the economy's backbone really remains manufacturing. The sources suggest the state has managed to maintain an impressive level of industrial employment despite national trends.
Manufacturing remains incredibly robust. It still accounts for a massive share of the state's GDP, and the state has maintained about 500,000 manufacturing jobs, a figure very similar to its levels in the 1970s.
Wow.
This stability is largely due to the diversification and specialization of its heavy industry.
Let's zoom in on the paper industry, which is highly concentrated in one specific water-rich corridor.
Wisconsin is the undeniable national leader in paper production, and the geographical concentration is incredible. Along just a 39-mile stretch of the Lower Fox River, which flows from Lake Winnebago to Green Bay, there are 24 paper mills.
Wow. A clear reliance on those water resources.
Which highlights both an economic strength and historically a significant environmental challenge due to industrial runoff.
And beyond paper, what are the household names in heavy manufacturing?
Wisconsin is home to major global players. In heavy equipment, you've got Rockwell Automation, Case IH, significant operations for Caterpillar, and of course the most iconic brand associated with Milwaukee,
Harley-Davidson.
Harley-Davidson motorcycles. This concentration of heavy equipment and specialized manufacturing is key to maintaining that high employment figure.
And on the consumer side, they've cornered the market on some recognizable food processing brands.
Absolutely. Oscar Mayer is based here, along with Tombstone Frozen Pizza and Johnsonville Brats. And we can't forget Milwaukee's historical nickname, Brew City, home to giants like Miller, Pabst, Schlitz, and Blotz.
Now, let's talk about the modernization of the economy, specifically that rapidly expanding high-tech healthcare sector.
This is where the future growth lies. Wisconsin has become a major hub for developing and manufacturing high-tech healthcare devices and software. Giants like GE Healthcare and Epic Systems.
Epic is one of the largest electronic health record providers in the world.
They are, and they're headquartered right here. Companies like TomoTherapy also drive innovation in radiation oncology. This shift shows a successful transition into high-value information technology and specialized services.
Time to delve into the fun, distinct, and sometimes quirky aspects of Wisconsin culture, which are inseparable from its agricultural and immigrant history. Starting with cuisine, beyond just the volume of cheese, what are the state's unique dairy contributions?
We have to highlight the specific cheese innovations. Colby cheese, a softer, moister version of cheddar, was first created in the town of Colby in 1885.
Okay.
And brick cheese, known for its strong aroma and semi-soft texture, was created in 1877. Notably, Wisconsin is home to the last place in the United States that still commercially produces Limburger cheese.
The famously pungent one, and of course the obligatory appetizer at every restaurant, the fried cheese curd.
The squeaky, battered, deep-fried cheese curd, often served with a side of ranch, is a state institution. But the food culture extends to specific regional traditions, heavily influenced by its location and immigration.
Like the Friday night fish fry.
Precisely. The Friday night fish fry is a quasi-religious tradition linked to the state's large Catholic immigrant population. It's usually battered perch, walleye, or cod.
And up in Door County, they have the fish boil.
A unique regional spectacle, the fish boil, where freshwater fish are boiled outdoors in a massive pot with potatoes and corn with a fiery flourish at the end.
And the official state pastry isn't a cream puff, it's something Danish.
That's right. The official state pastry is the kringle. This multi-layered, flaky, sweet pastry was brought by Danish immigrants, particularly to the Racine area. It became official in 2013.
Now let's tackle the drinking culture. The sources make it clear the state has one of the highest measures of per capita alcohol consumption in the country. What's the context for that?
The drinking culture is deeply woven into the German immigrant heritage, whose brewing traditions defined Milwaukee for over a century. It's what you'd call a wet culture. Alcohol is widely accepted in social settings.
So it's about frequency, not necessarily quantity per event.
While Wisconsin ranks near the top for consumption and frequency, the key detail is that consumption per event is generally moderate. This suggests a pattern of frequent, social, but controlled drinking rather than binge behavior.
It's a culture that supports the constant low-level integration of alcohol into social life. And while the big breweries are national, the local craft scene has its own famous exclusivity.
The craft beer movement is strong, but the most famous example is New Glarus Brewing Company. They are legendary for their Spotted Cow Farmhouse Ale, which is only sold within Wisconsin state lines.
Which has created this cult following.
And an immediate, tangible regional identity that outsiders just can't access.
Finally, we have to look at architecture, because Wisconsin produced one of the most defining figures in American building history.
That is Frank Lloyd Wright. He was born in Richland Center, Wisconsin, and was the pioneer of the Prairie School architectural style.
Emphasizing those low horizontal lines that integrated buildings into the landscape.
And the Usonian home concept, which aimed to provide high-quality, simple, and affordable housing for the middle class.
I want to pause on that Usonian concept. What does that look like on the ground?
Usonian homes were characterized by small, often L-shaped footprints, built with natural materials, flat roofs, and open living spaces. They were designed to eliminate superfluous ornamentation and expense.
The precursor to the modern ranch-style home.
Essentially, yes. And Wright's deep influence is internationally recognized. His Taliesin studio and his Jacobs House in Madison are collectively a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
That's tremendous global recognition. And yet Milwaukee also embraces radical contemporary architecture.
It does. The Milwaukee Art Museum's Quadracci Pavilion is a stunning example of modern design by Santiago Calatrava. Its most famous feature is the Burke Bryce Soli.
The massive wing-like sunscreen.
A massive sunscreen that opens and closes daily. With a wingspan of 217 feet, it dramatically alters the building's appearance, offering a sharp, futuristic contrast to Wright's organic, earth-hugging designs.
If Wisconsin is defined by anything, it is political intensity. It's not just a swing state now. It has been a laboratory for political movements and conflicts for over 150 years, often harboring intense, conflicting ideologies at the same time.
That tension is the core narrative of modern Wisconsin. It is a state where the tradition of fierce debate and political innovation runs deeper than almost anywhere else. And we start that story in the 1850s, driven by the escalating crisis over slavery.
And this anti-slavery movement led directly to the formation of one of the nation's two major political parties.
Absolutely. The modern Republican Party was founded right here in Ripon, Wisconsin in 1854. Disgusted by the lack of organized opposition to the expansion of slavery, local activists held a meeting that led to the formation of the new party.
An event that places Wisconsin right at the forefront of American political history. And following that, the state made a massive contribution to the Union effort during the Civil War.
A monumental contribution. Wisconsin sent around 91,000 troops, providing crucial manpower. This included 3 of the regiments that served in the famous Iron Brigade.
And we should mention the famous mascot associated with the war effort.
Yes, the 8th Wisconsin Infantry Regiment had one of the most celebrated mascots in military history, Old Abe, a captured bald eagle who accompanied the regiment into battle. He became a powerful symbol of the state's commitment.
So how could a state that birthed the anti-slavery Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, simultaneously incubate successful, pragmatic urban socialism decades later? How did those two forces coexist?
That is the essential contradiction.
Yeah.
And the factor that allowed them to coexist was the massive, politically engaged German immigrant population who are less focused on national issues and more focused on local economic justice and quality of life.
Right, so the socialist movement took hold in Milwaukee.
In the early 20th century, where German immigrants were concentrated in the industrial sector.
And this movement earned the unusual name sewer socialism. I want to dig into that specific label. What made it sewer socialism?
Sewer socialism was a term of self-identification. It distinguished Milwaukee's brand of socialism from the more radical, revolutionary Marxist socialism emerging elsewhere.
Their goal wasn't revolution.
No, it's practical civic improvement. They focused on public works, building efficient city utilities like clean water, effective sewage systems, better public schools, and fighting corruption. They prioritized good, clean municipal governance.
And this pragmatic approach led to success.
It did. In 1910, Milwaukee elected Emil Seidel, the first socialist mayor of a large U.S. city, and he was followed by others, resulting in decades of progressive, functional, socialist-led city governance.
That focus on pragmatic reform at the local level then transitioned to the state level and became perhaps Wisconsin's most enduring political legacy, the progressive movement, championed by Robert M. La Follette.
Fighting Bob La Follette. He was initially a Republican, but he spearheaded a movement aimed at attacking corporate power and corruption. His goal was nothing less than democratizing the political process and modernizing government through scientific expertise.
What were the key legislative achievements of the La Follette progressives that spread across the country?
They pioneered critical reforms. Wisconsin was the first state to establish a comprehensive statewide primary election system, giving control over nominations to the voters, not party bosses.
Okay.
They passed the nation's first effective workplace injury compensation law, forcing industries to take responsibility for worker safety. And they enacted the state's first state income tax, making taxation proportional to earnings, a radical concept at the time.
This whole philosophy that government should be led by experts and be responsive to the people, it culminated in the foundational concept known as the Wisconsin idea.
The Wisconsin idea is the ultimate political trademark of the state. It encapsulated the concept that the boundaries of the university should be the boundaries of the state itself.
So the University of Wisconsin system should serve the people directly.
By directly integrating its academic and scientific expertise into public policy and government.
I want to understand the mechanism here. How did this idea actually translate into policy? Did professors just wander over to the Capitol building?
It was highly formalized. University experts served on state commissions and legislative drafting committees, providing rigorous research to inform new laws. It meant that when Wisconsin faced a problem, it leveraged the intellectual capital of its research institution to develop data-driven solutions.
And those solutions didn't just stay in Madison, they became templates for the nation, especially in social safety nets.
Unquestionably. Leveraging this mechanism, UW professors helped Wisconsin create the United States' first unemployment compensation program in 1932, well ahead of the federal government.
And it influenced the New Deal.
Profoundly. Scholars trained in the Wisconsin idea philosophy were instrumental in drafting and implementing the New Deal's most significant piece of social legislation, the Social Security Act of 1935.
It's genuinely hard to overstate how much national policy on taxation, workplace safety, and the entire social safety net originated in this state's laboratory of democracy.
It really is.
But that same intense political climate also created serious divisions during World War I.
That's a crucial historical moment. Because of the high proportion of German and Scandinavian immigrants and the progressive movement's skepticism toward overseas entanglements, Wisconsin was controversially labeled the traitor state by some aggressive patriots in 1917.
But the state did mobilize.
Fiercely. Despite that early skepticism, the state sent over 118,000 men into military service and was the first state to report for national drafts.
Despite that powerful progressive legacy, the movement eventually declined. And that leads us to the other famous, or perhaps infamous, political figure of the mid-20th century.
The decline is dramatically symbolized by the 1946 Republican primary. Robert La Follette Jr., who had tried to sustain the movement, was narrowly defeated by an up-and-coming political figure named Joseph McCarthy.
Wow.
That primary loss ended the political dominance of the La Follette name and allowed McCarthy to gain the Senate seat from which he launched his destructive anti-communist crusades in the 1950s.
And as the state moved into the 21st century, it became the definition of the American political swing state competitive at every level, often decided by less than 1%.
It is the ultimate bellwether. Wisconsin is crucial in presidential elections, consistently producing tight, narrow results. In 2016, Donald Trump won the state by just 0.77%. 4 years later, Joe Biden reclaimed it by an even narrower 0.63% margin.
The margins are always razor thin.
Always.
Yeah.
And that competitive streak, according to our sources, intensified even further in the 2024 presidential election.
What happened then?
Donald Trump won Wisconsin again, but by just 0.87%, a margin which, in a sign of the state's perpetual tightness, made it the state with the closest margin of victory in the entire presidential election.
And historically, it's just perfectly balanced.
It is. Since 1848, it's been won by Republican presidential candidates 26 times and Democrats 18 times. It proves the long-term back-and-forth nature of its politics.
The modern political conflict hasn't just been in federal elections. The state saw a massive, polarizing controversy at the state level in 2011.
That was the Wisconsin Act 10 controversy. This was an act passed by the Republican-controlled legislature and signed by Governor Scott Walker that fundamentally altered the collective bargaining rights of most public sector employees.
It dramatically limited the power of public unions.
Yes, and the reaction was immediate and enormous.
Massive protests at the state capitol.
Weeks of them. The contention was so severe that it led to a historic event. Governor Scott Walker faced a recall election in 2012, which he survived. He became the first governor in U.S. history to successfully survive a recall election.
Beyond the drama of the recall, some political scientists have levied a serious structural criticism, classifying the state's governmental structure in recent years as something unusual.
Yes. Based on academic analysis, some political scientists have gone so far as to classify Wisconsin as a hybrid regime. Now, we need to pause and understand what that means in this context.
Okay.
The argument is that while elections themselves are free, the state has seen the implementation of extreme partisan gerrymanders in its legislative districts.
So the critique is that the drawing of political maps entrenched one party's control beyond what the statewide popular vote would suggest.
Exactly. The claim is that the mapping has been so effective that it essentially insulates the legislative body from the competitive swing state nature of the statewide popular vote.
That's the explanation for the hybrid regime classification.
It is. However, it is vital to note that this conflict led to legal action, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court did, in fact, overturn those legislative maps in a ruling in 2023, forcing new districts to be drawn.
Before we move to our final thoughts, let's briefly look at the state's foundational structures, starting with education, which is obviously integral to the Wisconsin idea.
The University of Wisconsin system is extensive and remains dedicated to that core principle. It includes the flagship institution, UW-Madison, and UW-Milwaukee, both of which are classified as Tier 1 research universities.
And that's supplemented by the technical college system.
Yes, the 16-campus Wisconsin Technical College System, which awards 2-year degrees and technical diplomas, catering directly to the manufacturing and industrial workforce.
Wisconsin also has some deeply rooted private institutions.
It does. Carroll University was chartered in 1846, Wisconsin's first institution of higher education. Beloit College, also chartered that year, is the state's oldest continuously operated college.
And Marquette.
Marquette University is the largest private university by enrollment and made history in 1909 by becoming the world's first coeducational Catholic university.
Finally, let's look at infrastructure. The state has a unique and highly specific funding mechanism for its transportation network.
This is a great detail that speaks to a kind of fiscal conservatism and planning. Wisconsin is served by 8 interstate highways, but the critical point is the transportation fund.
Which is kept entirely separate from the state's general fund.
Exactly. Revenues from transportation sources, gas taxes, vehicle registration fees, are legally required to be used only on transportation infrastructure.
So it's a dedicated, constitutionally separated fund designed to ensure infrastructure funding isn't rated for other state purposes.
That is the political philosophy behind it, ensuring reliable, dedicated funding for roads and bridges without being subject to the ebb and flow of the general budget process.
And we should mention the state's deep history in motorsports, too.
Yes, the heritage is immense. The Milwaukee Mile, an oval track, opened in 1903 and holds the distinction of being the oldest operating motorsports venue in the entire world.
Amazing.
And down in Kenosha, you find the nation's oldest operating velodrome, which has hosted bicycle races every year since 1927. It underscores a deep, continuous commitment to engineering and speed.
We have completed a comprehensive journey into Wisconsin today, moving well past the simple stereotypes of cheese and beer. We've seen a state defined by immense geological forces that left the driftless area untouched, a history of settlement dictated by the raw forces of the fur trade and lead mining, which gave us that Badger nickname.
And an economic identity forged by an environmental crisis that forced the pivot to dairyland. More profoundly, we've confirmed its status as a critical, enduring laboratory for American policy, hosting intense, contradictory political movements from the birth of the GOP to the success of urban socialism.
And above all, we analyze the legacy of the progressive era and the implementation of the Wisconsin idea.
Right.
That educational philosophy, the idea that the university exists to serve the state through the direct application of intellectual capital, that was the mechanism that led directly to the development of crucial national structures like Social Security and unemployment compensation.
This connection between rigorous inquiry and direct public service is the state's ultimate political trademark.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought. Given how central the Wisconsin idea has been to the state's ability to innovate and lead utilizing the intellectual capital of its university system, we have to look at the recent challenges facing that system. We noted that since 2023, due to financial concerns and restructuring, 5 University of Wisconsin branch campuses have been closed, and others have been significantly altered.
A major shift.
So, if the foundation of policy innovation for the entire state, the foundation of the Wisconsin idea itself, is being eroded by the closure of these regional campuses that physically and intellectually connect the university directly to the people.
Then the question becomes,
In a state so reliant on quick, thorough knowledge for navigating complex political contests, demanding modern industries, and maintaining a high standard of living, what impact will that erosion have on Wisconsin's ability to continue to lead the nation in policy and innovation moving forward?
that is the pivotal question of Wisconsin's immediate future. We leave you with that thought. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Badger State.